There is a specific kind of pain that lives inside a marriage when you suspect the person you love most is keeping something from you. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not arrive with proof or certainty. It is just a quiet, persistent wrongness. The kind that lives in the details. The unexplained absences. The deflected questions. The phone calls taken in another room. The man who comes home tired in a way that has no clear explanation. The man who says everything is fine with the particular smoothness of someone who has been saying it long enough that it no longer sounds smooth. Most people who have carried that kind of suspicion describe it as the loneliest feeling a marriage can produce, not the grief of confirmed betrayal. Something worse than that in some ways, the not knowing. The being left outside the door of something your husband walks through and closes behind him. Carol Mitchell had lived with that feeling for 12 years. 12 years of Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, when her husband Raymond came home after 9-0 smelling like coffee and looking like a man who had been somewhere specific that he was not going to tell her about. 12 years of reasonable explanations that were never quite enough. 12 years of trusting him because she had decided to trust him. Not because she had the proof that said she should. Steve Harvey has been sitting across from families long enough to know when a room is holding something. He has interviewed thousands of couples. He has seen the chemistry of long marriages under pressure, and he knows the way you know a thing after years of paying attention when there is more between two people than what is on the surface. But on a Wednesday afternoon in July, discover more Social Sciences Language Translation Service Financing 2024. In a studio in Atlanta, Georgia, he sat across from a woman who had carried 12 years of unanswered questions about her husband's double life. And when the truth came out, all of it, on live television in front of 400 people who had come expecting a game show. What Steve Harvey saw on Carol Mitchell's face was not what anyone in that room had anticipated. It was not anger. It was not relief. It was something that had no clean name. The specific, overwhelming, irreversible feeling of a woman who has just that the secret she feared most turned out to be the most beautiful thing her husband had ever done. This is their story. Raymond Arthur Mitchell was born in 1964 in Greensboro, North Carolina, the oldest of 3 boys. His father drove a delivery truck, and his mother taught 2nd grade at the elementary school 3 blocks from their house. And the household they ran together was the kind that valued 2 things above everything else: showing up and shutting up. Not shutting up in the unkind sense. Shutting up in the sense that his father believed in. The sense that a man who is constantly talking about what he is doing is not actually doing it. That the work speaks. That you do not narrate your own goodness. You just do it, and you come home, and you move on. Raymond's father, Curtis Mitchell, had grown up in rural North Carolina in circumstances that produced in him a particular philosophy about service. His own father, Raymond's grandfather, had been the kind of man that a community orbits without knowing it is orbiting. The person people called when the car broke down, or the rent was short, or the child needed a ride to the hospital, and there was nobody else. He never talked about it. He just showed up. And when he passed in 1978, the number of people at his funeral was so far beyond what the family had expected that they ran out of chairs, and people stood 3 deep along the walls and spilled out the door onto the street. Curtis Mitchell told his sons about that funeral many times. Not to make a point about legacy or recognition. To make a point about how a life actually works. That the quiet ones, the ones doing the work without the narration, are the ones who fill the room at the end. Raymond listened. Raymond was 17 years old in the spring of 1981, when something happened that his family knew about only in the broad outline. That he had been in trouble. That it had been serious. And that a man he did not know had intervened at the precise moment when the outcome could have gone a different direction. The man's name was Gerald Watkins. He ran a youth outreach program through a church in Greensboro, not a large operation, not a funded organization. Just a man who opened up a back room 3 nights a week and made himself available to teenagers who were in the kind of trouble that does not announce itself until it is almost too late. Raymond walked into that back room on a Tuesday night in March 1981 because a friend had told him Gerald gave out free food, and Raymond was hungry. He came back the following Thursday because Gerald had looked at him, not at his situation, not at his potential, but at him specifically as if he were a person worth the full attention of another person. And that was an unusual enough experience that Raymond found himself wanting more of it. He spent the next year and a half in Gerald Watkins's back room. He graduated high school. He got into a 2-year technical college on a partial grant. He became an electrician. He built a career and a life in Charlotte, North Carolina that was, by every practical measure, a good one. He never stopped thinking about Gerald Watkins. He met Carol in 1989 at a church picnic in Charlotte. She was 27 years old working as a school counselor. And she was in the middle of a very heated discussion about the rules of the three-legged race with a group of 8-year-olds when Raymond walked over to offer what he thought was a helpful observation about where the starting line should be. She looked at him with the expression of a woman who did not need a helpful observation about the starting line, and communicated this without a word. He found this enormously appealing. He stayed and helped organize the race, and then helped clean up after, and then asked her if she wanted to get coffee, and she said yes in a tone that suggested she had already decided yes before he asked, and was just waiting for him to catch up. They were married in June 1991. They built a life in Charlotte with the steady intentionality of two people who understood what they were doing, and meant every part of it. 2 children. Their son Marcus, who was 31 now, working in construction, his father's son in every way, and their daughter Brianna, who was 28, a nurse in Charlotte. Her mother's daughter in the way that daughters sometimes are so thoroughly that it takes your breath away. The family was close. The marriage was solid. Not perfect. No marriage is perfect. And Raymond and Carol were both too honest to pretend otherwise, but real, built on genuine respect and genuine friendship, and the particular intimacy of 2 people who have been through enough together that they no longer need to perform anything for each other. Which is why the Tuesday in 2012 had felt like the beginning of something Carol did not know how to name. She had come home early from work. Raymond's truck was in the driveway, which was not unusual. But when she came inside, he was on the phone in the bedroom with the door closed, which was not Raymond. Raymond did not close doors for phone calls. He had never, in 21 years of marriage, been a man who took calls in another room. She did not eavesdrop. She set her bag down and made tea, and when he came out, he said it had been a work call. He said it casually, and moved on, and she accepted it because she had no reason not to, and because she was not a woman who looked for trouble where there was none. But then there was the Thursday he came home at 9:15 and said he had been at the hardware store. And when she mentioned the hardware store had closed at 8:00, he said he had been talking to someone in the parking lot and lost track of time. And the Saturday he came home smelling like institutional coffee. The specific kind. The kind that comes from machines in waiting rooms and community centers, and said he had been helping a buddy move some boxes. The explanations were not impossible. They were just slightly off. Slightly too smooth. Slightly too ready in the way that explanations are slightly too ready when they have been prepared in advance. Carol was a school counselor. She had spent her entire career reading the space between what people said and what they meant. She was not a suspicious woman by nature, but she was a precise one. And something in her husband's behavior had a quality she could not resolve. She asked him directly. Once, in 2014, a Thursday night when he came home after 9:00, and she was sitting at the kitchen table waiting. "Raymond," she said, "I need you to tell me where you go." He sat down across from her. He looked at her for a long moment. "I promise you," he said, "that there is nothing wrong. Nothing you need to be worried about. There is no one else. There has never been anyone else. I need you to trust me." She looked at him. "Then tell me," she said. "I can't yet," he said. "But I will. When the time is right, I will tell you everything and it will make sense. It's not time yet." She looked at him for a long time. She made a decision. She decided to trust him. Not because she had proof, because she knew this man. She had shared a bed with him for 23 years, and sat across from him at the breakfast table and watched him with their children, and she knew the way you know a thing when you have paid real attention for long enough that he was not built for cruelty. Whatever he was keeping from her, it was not cruelty. She trusted him. She kept trusting him for 8 more years through every Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday, through the institutional coffee and the deflected questions and the ready explanations. She trusted him and she carried the weight of not knowing, and she did not bring it up again until Family Feud. It was Brianna who had submitted the application. Their daughter, a nurse. Practical to her bones with her mother's precision and her father's quiet, had done it in February as a birthday gift for her parents. They were turning 33 years married in June. Brianna thought it would be something different, something that pulled the whole family into one place for a day, with no agenda other than being together. She told her parents at Sunday dinner in April. Carol's response was immediate. "I am not embarrassing myself on television." Raymond looked at Brianna and said, "What time do we need to be there?" Carol looked at her husband. "You're not even going to discuss it?" she said. "You're going to say yes eventually," Raymond said. "I know you well enough to know that." Carol looked at him for a moment with the expression of a woman who has been accurately read by the same man for 33 years and has mixed feelings about it. "What time do we need to be there?" she said finally. Not a question, a surrender. The team was four: Carol, Raymond, Marcus, who drove up from his construction job in Colombia, and Brianna, who took the day off from the hospital. They drove to Atlanta together on a Tuesday, and Carol noticed, sitting in the passenger seat with the Georgia highway going past the window, that Raymond was relaxed in a particular way he had not been on a Tuesday in a very long time. Relaxed, unguarded, the specific ease of a man who has set something down and is traveling light. She did not say anything about it. The studio was bright and warm, and moving with the organized energy of a place that knew exactly what it was doing. The production team welcomed them with the comfortable efficiency of people who handle families every day and are genuinely good at it. Steve Harvey's producer came into the green room, introduced himself, shook Raymond's hand. "What do you do, Miss Mitchell?" he asked. "Electrician," Raymond said. 30 years. Good honest work," the producer said. "Yes," Raymond agreed. "It is." Carol watched her husband say this and thought, the way she had thought on and off for 12 years, in the gaps between trusting him, that there was something in his face when he said it. Not guilt, not hiding, something that looked almost like readiness. She let it go. The opposing family was the Henderson family from Augusta, large, fast, and clearly well prepared. They jumped out to a lead in the first round that made Marcus narrow his eyes the way he narrowed them on job sites when something was not going the way it was supposed to go. He steadied the team in the second round with 2 strong answers and a composure under pressure that Raymond recognized, because he had watched it develop in his son from the time the boy was 15 years old. Brianna was quick in the third round and got a number 1 answer on a question about family traditions that she answered, "Sunday dinner," before Steve finished the sentence. The audience responded warmly. Brianna had her mother's natural ease with rooms full of people, which was the kind of ease that cannot be taught and should not be wasted. Carol was precise. She did not swing at answers she was not certain of. She waited, and when she was certain, she answered with the confidence of a woman who has spent 3 decades telling the truth to children and has forgotten how to do it any other way. 2 strong answers in the 4th round pushed the Mitchell family into the lead. And Raymond answered with the quiet efficiency of a man who has been solving problems steadily and without drama for 30 years. He got the number 2 answer on a question about what a man does when something at home is broken, and the number 3 answer on a question about what makes a neighborhood feel safe. He did not celebrate either answer. He just nodded and stepped back the way he always did when something was done and it was time to move to the next thing. The Mitchell family won the main game 341 to 299. Marcus shook his father's hand in the way of a son who is proud and is not going to make a speech about it. Brianna hugged her mother. Carol looked at Raymond and he looked back at her with an expression she recognized. The warm, private between them expression that 33 years of marriage produces between 2 people and belongs only to them. Before fast money, Steve worked his way down the line. He talked to Marcus about construction. He talked to Brianna about nursing and made the audience laugh with a 2-minute conversation about hospital food that was entirely Brianna's material. He talked to Carol about school counseling and the particular patience it requires, and said something genuine about teachers and counselors that the audience heard and appreciated. Then he walked to Raymond. He stopped in front of him. He looked at him. He had the skill built across decades of this work of reading something in a person's posture before a word was exchanged. He looked at Raymond Mitchell and he saw a man who was carrying something that had some size to it. "Raymond," he said, 33 years. 33 years, Raymond confirmed. Electrician, 30 years. Honest work, Steve said. Yes, Raymond said. I've always thought so. Steve looked at him. Your family tells me you work a lot of evenings. Raymond was still. Carol at the other end of the line went very still too. I do, Raymond said. What kind of work keeps an electrician out on Tuesday and Thursday evenings? Steve asked, lightly, conversationally, the tone of a man who is asking a simple question. Raymond looked at Steve Harvey. And in the pause that followed, a pause that lasted no more than 3 seconds, but had the particular density of something that has been waiting a long time to happen, Carol Mitchell turned and looked at her husband the way she had not allowed herself to look at him in 12 years. Without the trust layered over it, without the decision to believe, with the raw, open face of a woman who has been carrying a question for 12 years and is suddenly, unexpectedly, standing right next to the answer. It's not electrical work, Raymond said. The studio went quiet. Steve did not move. Then what is it? He said. Raymond looked at his wife. He had looked at her 1,000 times across 33 years. In the delivery room when Marcus was born and she was exhausted, and the most powerful person he had ever seen. Across the breakfast table on the ordinary mornings that turned out to be the most important ones. At the kitchen table in 2014 when she had asked him directly, and he had told her to trust him. And she had made the decision to do it. And he had understood. In that moment, what she had given him. He looked at her now with the expression of a man who is about to put something down that he has been carrying for a long time, and is not entirely sure what he will feel when his hands are empty. In 2012, he said, and the studio was already silent. The 400-person kind of silence that happens when a room collectively understands that the game has stopped and something real has started. I got a call from a man named Gerald Watkins. He ran the youth outreach program that saved my life when I was 17 years old. I have never talked about that publicly. Carol knows the broad version that I was in trouble at 17 and someone helped me. She does not know the specifics, and that is a different conversation for a different day. He paused. Gerald called me in 2012 to tell me he was retiring, that he was closing down the program, that there were 34 kids currently coming through his doors, and he did not know what was going to happen to them. The studio held itself still. I told him I would take it over, Raymond said simply. Steve Harvey did not speak. I had been an electrician for 20 years by then, Raymond continued. I had a good income. I had flexibility in my schedule. I had a wife who I trusted completely, and who I was about to ask to trust me in return. He looked at Carol. I did not tell her what I was doing, because Gerald's program was built on a specific principle, that the kids who came through the door needed to know that the person across the table from them was there for them specifically. Not for recognition. Not to feel good about themselves. Not to post about it. Just for them. He stopped. I knew Carol. If I told her, she would be proud of me, and I was afraid, honestly afraid that if I started receiving credit for it, something in me would shift. That the work would start being about the credit instead of the kids. He stopped for a moment. I know that sounds like a lot to put on my wife, he said. I know she has been carrying something she did not understand for 12 years. I know that was not fair. His voice did not break, but it carried something that was close to breaking. The sound of a man who has made peace with a decision, but not with all of its costs. I am going to have to answer for that. But not today. Today I just want her to know what the Tuesday nights were. Carol had not moved. She was standing at the end of the contestant line with both hands pressed flat against her thighs, and her face had traveled through more things in the last 90 seconds than most faces travel through in a year. The suspicion, 12 years of it, had moved out of her face in the first 10 seconds. What replaced it was something more complicated, not simple relief, not simple joy, something that had grief in it. Grief for the 12 years of carrying the wrong question, and something that was larger than both. What were the Tuesday nights? Steve asked. Quietly, I run a youth outreach program, Raymond said, out of a rented space at a community center in East Charlotte. We serve kids between 14 and 22, who are in the kind of trouble that does not get them arrested yet, but will if nobody intervenes. We are open Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evenings. He paused. We have been open for 12 years. In 12 years, we have had 437 kids come through the door. Steve Harvey sat back in his chair. 437, he said. Yes, in 12 years. Yes, by yourself. But no. For the first time, Raymond smiled. Small, genuine, I have 7 volunteers now. All of them former participants in the program. Kids who came through the door in the first 3 or 4 years and came back later to give what they had received. He paused. That is the part that Gerald taught me. The program does not grow from the outside in. It grows from the inside out. You give to the kids, and the kids become the program. Steve was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Carol. She was walking forward. She had not been directed to come forward. No producer had gestured. She had simply started moving from the end of the contestant line toward her husband, with the specific momentum of a woman who has been standing still for 12 years and cannot do it anymore. She walked to him and she stopped in front of him and she looked at his face. The face she had looked at across the breakfast table for 33 years. The face she had trusted against the evidence and despite the not knowing, and through every Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday for 12 years, and she said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "The coffee." Raymond looked at her. "You always come home smelling like that terrible institutional coffee," she said. Her voice was not steady and she was not trying to make it steady. "I used to think about where that smell was coming from. What kind of place had coffee like that?" She stopped. "A community center. The machine has needed replacing for 6 years, Raymond said. "The kids keep fixing it with spare parts." Carol made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob, but had the quality of both. The particular sound of something long held finally releasing. She put her hands on either side of her husband's face. She looked at him for a moment. "You absolute," she stopped. She shook her head. 12 years, Raymond, I know," he said. "I sat at that table in 2014, and I looked at you, and I asked you directly." "I know," he said. "And you said to trust you." "I know," he said. "And you did." She was crying now, the full unguarded kind, the kind she did not let happen in professional settings, or in front of her children when she could help it. But she was not in a professional setting. She was on a game show stage in Atlanta, and her husband had just told her what the Tuesday nights were, and she did not have any composure left for this, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she said. "Because you would have loved me for it," Raymond said simply. "And I needed to do it without being loved for it. I needed it to just be what it was, without becoming about me." Carol stared at him. "That is the most." She stopped. "You are the most." She stopped again. "Frustrating?" Raymond offered. "Extraordinary," she said. "Frustrating is second." The audience broke the warm, wet, helpless kind of laughter that comes when people are crying and something lands perfectly inside the crying. And they have no choice but to let both happen at once. Steve Harvey had stood up at some point during this exchange. He was not sure exactly when. He was standing in the middle of his own stage, and he had his hand pressed over his mouth, and his eyes were doing the thing they did when he had given up on managing them. And he was simply letting it happen. He stood there for a moment. Then he looked at the audience. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried again. 437 kids, he said, in 12 years on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, smelling like bad community center coffee. He shook his head slowly. And his wife, this woman right here, carried 12 years of not knowing, trusted him without the proof, stayed, and what she was afraid was happening. He stopped, turned out to be the best thing he has ever done. The audience stood. Steve turned back to Raymond. "She thought she was exposing you," Steve said. "She came in here with 12 years of questions. And what she exposed was," he stopped again, and laughed briefly in the helpless way, "the fact that you have been living a double life as a very quiet hero." Raymond looked uncomfortable at that, the specific discomfort of a man who has spent 12 years specifically not being called that. "They are the heroes," he said. "The kids who come back and sit on the other side of the table. They are the ones doing the work." Steve pointed at him. "See," he said to the audience. "See how he does that? He cannot even take the compliment." He looked at Carol. 33 years of this. Carol laughed, the full actual laugh, the one that belonged to the kitchen table, and the 33 years, and the side of her husband that no one ever managed to fully get to the bottom of. 33 years, she confirmed. The executive producer stepped forward. The $20,000 prize was confirmed, and Family Feud, in partnership with the National Youth Outreach Foundation, was contributing an additional $25,000 directly to Raymond's program in Charlotte, specifically designated for the community center space rental, the terrible coffee machine that had needed replacing for 6 years, and a small fund for the 7 volunteers to receive formal youth counseling training. When the producer announced the contribution, Raymond sat down in the chair behind him. Not dramatically, not collapsing. Just the quiet sitting down of a man who has received something larger than his composure, was prepared to hold while standing. Carol sat beside him. She took his hand. She held it the way she had held his hand through every hard season of 33 years, not gently, but firmly. The hold of a woman who is not going anywhere. "I want to meet them," she said. "What? The kids, the volunteers, the ones who came back." She looked at him. "I want to meet them." Raymond looked at his wife. "You have always known me," he said. "Better than I knew myself." "I knew you," she said. "I just didn't know this part. And I want to." In the back of the studio, something happened that the production team had not arranged, and had not seen coming. A door at the side of the audience opened. A young man walked in. He was 26 years old. He was wearing a collared shirt, and he was holding a piece of paper, and he looked like someone who had driven a very long distance, and was not going to apologize for it. He had heard the taping was today. He had found out through the community center. He had driven 4 hours from Charlotte. His name was Darius. He had walked through the door of Raymond's program at 15 years old. The Tuesday night 3 months after the program opened, when it had 4 kids and a folding table and the terrible coffee machine. He had come back at 19 as a volunteer. He was now studying social work at a university in Charlotte, on a scholarship he had applied for with Raymond's help. He stood in the side entrance of the studio with his piece of paper, and he looked at Raymond and he said, clearly enough for the microphone to catch, "I was not going to miss this, Coach." Raymond Mitchell looked at the young man in the doorway. He stood up. Steve Harvey stepped back. The whole studio stepped back, not physically, but in the way a room steps back when it understands that what is happening in front of it is not for them. It is for 2 people who have traveled a long way toward each other and have finally arrived. Raymond crossed the stage and put his arms around Darius in the way that a man holds someone he has watched grow from a frightened 15-year-old into a person he is proud of, in the specific way you are proud of something you did not create, but were trusted to help carry. Darius held the piece of paper out without letting go. It was a letter handwritten from 12 of the program's current participants and 3 of the returning volunteers. It said in various handwritings, in various levels of grammar, in the various voices of people between 15 and 28 who do not write letters often, but understood that this was the occasion for one. What Raymond's Tuesday nights had given them. Carol read it over her husband's shoulder. She did not get past the 3rd paragraph before she stopped trying to keep herself together. Steve Harvey did not even try. The episode aired on a Monday evening in August. By Tuesday morning, the clip of Raymond saying "I needed to do it without being loved for it" had been viewed 8 million times. By Thursday, it had passed 20 million. It moved the way things move when they answer a question people have been carrying, not with noise, but with the quiet speed of recognition. The comment that appeared beneath every version of the clip, shared and reshared across every platform, had been left by a man who identified himself as a retired youth counselor from Detroit. "I have given my life to this work for 35 years. I have never told anyone the full scope of it, because the moment you start telling people, it changes. It starts being about you." This man understood that at the deepest level, and he protected it for 12 years at great personal cost. That is not sacrifice. That is integrity. There is a difference. It was shared 9 million times. The $25,000 contribution was announced publicly by the Youth Foundation the week after the episode aired. Within 48 hours, private donations to Raymond's program had exceeded $180,000 from individuals across the country who had watched the episode and wanted to be part of something that had been quietly real for 12 years, without asking to be noticed. Raymond spent a week going through the donations with the same methodical care he gave to electrical work, breaking down what was needed, what would last, what would make the program stronger for the next 12 years, rather than just the next 12 months. New chairs, a real coffee machine, finally, a part-time paid coordinator position so the volunteers could focus on the work instead of the administration. A fund for emergency assistance, bus passes, work clothes, application fees, the small costs that derail young people who are trying to get somewhere. He named the emergency fund after Gerald Watkins. He called Gerald's daughter to tell her. She was 71 years old and living in Winston-Salem, and she cried for 10 minutes on the phone, and then collected herself and said that her father would have told Raymond it was unnecessary and excessive, and that he was very grateful. Carol went to the program the following Tuesday. She drove to the community center in East Charlotte, and she walked through the door at 6:30 in the evening, and she saw it. The folding tables, the chairs, the whiteboard, the terrible coffee machine that was being replaced the following week, but was still running in the meantime. The 7 volunteers moving around the room with the specific ease of people who know exactly what they are doing. And why? She saw the kids. She sat in the back of the room for 3 hours. She did not introduce herself as Raymond's wife. She said she was visiting, that she was interested in the program, and she watched her husband work, watched him sit across from a 17-year-old girl who was angry in the particular way of a person who has been let down enough times to stop expecting better. And she watched him meet that anger with a patience and a steadiness, and a refusal to be driven back from the table that she recognized immediately because she had been sleeping beside it for 33 years. She drove home at 10:30. Raymond came home at 11 to low, the way he always did on Tuesdays. He found her sitting at the kitchen table. He sat down across from her. They looked at each other. "You were there," he said. He had seen her leave as he was wrapping up. "I was there," she said. He waited. "The girl," Carol said, the 17-year-old in the green jacket in the back corner. "Maya," Raymond said. "She reminds me of a student I had in 2008, Carol said. "I did not reach her. She left school before I could figure out the right way in." She stopped. "You found it. Tonight I watched you find it." Raymond did not say anything. "I am not angry anymore," Carol said. "I want you to know that. I am not angry about the 12 years. I understand why you did it the way you did it. I do not agree with all of it. We are going to have a long conversation about what trust means and what it costs, but I understand it." She looked at him across the kitchen table, where they had eaten 33 years of dinners and had 33 years of conversations. "But I am going to come back on Thursday and Saturday. And I am not going to sit in the back." Raymond looked at his wife. "Carol," he said, "the program was built on the idea that you do not do it for the credit." "I know," she said. "I am not coming for the credit. I am coming because I am a school counselor and you have been doing what I do without the training, and somehow not making any of the mistakes I make, and I want to know how." She paused. "And because Maya needs someone to find the right way in. And I think I might know what it is." She looked at him steadily. "You do not have a monopoly on quiet service, Raymond. You just got a 12-year head start." Raymond Mitchell looked at his wife of 33 years and felt something that he did not have an adequate word for. Something that was made of all the years of trusting each other through things neither of them could fully explain. Something that was made of 12 years of Tuesday nights and institutional coffee, and a woman who had carried a question without letting it break what they had. "Okay," he said. Steve Harvey talked about the Mitchells on his radio program that week. He did not plan a long segment. He brought it up the way things come up when they will not leave. She thought she was exposing his double life, he said. She came in there with 12 years of unanswered questions, and she got the answer on national television in front of 400 people. He stopped. And the answer was the double life was a youth program. 437 kids in 12 years, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Bad community center coffee. He was quiet for a moment. He did not tell her because he needed to protect the work from becoming about him. He chose the work over his own reputation, in his own house with the person he loved most. He paused. Most of us cannot that kind of discipline in private for 12 years. This man did it inside a marriage. He let it sit. And his wife, he said finally, trusted him without the proof. She made a decision, and she held it for 12 years, and it turned out to be the right one. He stopped again. That is the part that gets me. Not just what he was doing, but that she stayed. That she chose trust when she did not have to. And that staying turned out to be the right call. Darius graduated from his social work program the following May. He walked across the stage, and he had 2 people in the audience he wanted to find immediately after. His mother in the 3rd row, and Raymond Mitchell in the 7th, who had told him the 7th row was as close as he was going to get, because he did not want to be conspicuous, and Darius had known him long enough to know there's no point arguing. Darius found his mother first. Then he found Raymond. He shook his hand, and then bypassed the hand, and hugged him, and Raymond stood there in the 7th row of a university auditorium and held the young man he had sat across from for the first time 11 years ago when he was a frightened 15-year-old who had come in for the free food and stayed. For everything else, Carol was beside Raymond. She had been coming to the program on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 9 months. She had found the way into Maya in her 2nd week, a conversation about books of all things. That opened a door that Carol had recognized immediately because she had opened exactly that door for students at her school for 30 years. Maya was still coming. Carol squeezed Raymond's arm. He looked at her. She looked back at him with the full 33-year look, the one that needed no translation. There is a specific kind of love that does not ask to be known. It just does the work. It shows up on Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. It smells like institutional coffee and comes home after 9 doro and says everything is fine with the smoothness of a man who has made peace with the cost of what he has chosen. Most people carry their whole lives wondering if they loved well enough. Raymond Mitchell had his answer in 437 stories. Carol Mitchell had her answer in the 7th row of a university auditorium on a May afternoon, standing next to the man who had asked her to trust him 33 years ago and had spent every day since trying to deserve it. She had trusted him. She always had. It turned out, as it always does with the ones worth trusting, that she had been right.